Hello everyone, my name is Bavra and today I'm gonna show you how to effectively use voice commands in Star Trek Online. Now before we get to that, just a few words about my build. I'm currently running a pretty straightforward auxiliary to battery build on my Jem'Hadar heavy escort carrier, and I'm not gonna explain how the build works, but I'm gonna link it in the description below, and I'm also gonna link a video that shows how it's done. Now, voice commands. You would think it would be pretty cool if we could just perform any action in the game using only voice commands, but if you think a bit about it, that's not really a good idea. Like, imagine you're like in battle against some nasty Borg or Klingons or whatever, and you're like, emergency power to shields, tactical team, attack pattern Omega, scatter volley 3, oh my god, brace for impact. That wouldn't work, because it would be extremely tedious after a very short span of time. So instead what we are going to do is to try to automate as many short cooldown skills as possible, so that we don't have to either click or call for them, and then have a select few skills, most of them which will have a longer cooldown, on voice call. This way it will not be tedious. We will only have to, yell for command like every 10 or maybe 20 seconds, and it won't get old so fast. Now, to achieve that, we need two programs. One of them is Windows speech recognition macros, and the other one is Autohotkey, and both of those are free. Now, let's get to it. Alright, let's start off by setting up some in-game options. I'm not gonna explain my exact reasoning behind every single one of those, because most of them should be fairly self-explanatory, but if you're still unsure or have questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. Now, first go to Options, Basic, and set Enable Auto Loot to On. Then head over to Controls and set Click Unselects Target to Off. Also set Select Auto Target on Attack to On. Also set Never Auto Target Pets to On, and finally on the Auto Attack drop-down menu select Toggle Non-Combat Cancels. Then head over to the Keybind sections. Now, I would strongly recommend that for throttle forward and backward you set mouse scroll up and down as well as the E and Q keys. Now the reason behind this is that once the entire scheme is set up correctly, you should be able to control the entire game with only one hand, and you only need that hand to steer the ship. So this can either be your mouse hand or your left hand by using WASD and E and Q to increase or decrease your speed. Now you might notice that once you set the mouse scroll keys for throttle, you won't be able to use them for zooming in and out the camera, so you have to set up those keys too. I use Shift and the mouse scroll keys, but you can use any key you like. Now, leave the keybinds menu and make sure to set your power tray mode to 3. Now we want mode 3 because we need the weapons tray and the power tray with 3 rows. What we don't want is the bridge officer power tray, so go to Rearrange HUD and hide it, because it's redundant and we really don't need it. Now make sure that all your weapons, including torpedoes, are auto-firing by right-clicking them. Finally, open up your power menu by hitting P per default, and make sure that you drag and drop every single power that you possibly want to use in your tray. Now this includes both the powers that you want to fire automatically whenever they are off cooldown, as well as the powers that you want to be able to call per voice. It really doesn't matter how you arrange them, if it has any logic to it or not, or if it looks pretty or not, but every single power that you want to actually use must be in your power tray. Now it's time to make a few decisions. You have to think about which powers do you want to fire automatically and which powers do you want to be able to call specifically. Like, for example, Tactical Team. This power has a 10-second duration, but with my auxiliary to battery build, it only has a 15-second cooldown. So this is a power that I want to fire whenever it is off cooldown, so it is up most of the time. Same thing goes for emergency power to shields, transfer shield strength, and so on. So like every short cooldown, relatively high duration skill you want to fire automatically. Now there are other skills like tactical fleet, go down fighting, brace for impact. Those are skills that have situational use and that you don't want to fire up all the time. Now, for those skills we need to set up keybinds. For every one of those long-ass cooldown skills that you want to be able to call specifically, we need to set up a single unmodified key. By unmodified, I mean it must not be modified with like Control, Alt or Shift. It must be a single key. Now I like to use the numpad keys for those, but it can again be any key you like you know, T or L or whatever. But I like to use the numpad keys. For example here, numpad 4 fires up the skill 8 second row skill, which in my case is reverse shield polarity. Now once you have set up your single unmodified keys for all the powers that you want to use by calling them with your voice, you are basically done. There's nothing more to do in-game. Next, I will show you how to make a keybind file so we can basically set all the powers we want to use automatically to autofire. Alright, time to set up our keybind file, but before we get to that, just a little addendum to the previous part where a little detail slipped my mind, namely go to Options and Keybinds again and make sure to also set a single unmodified key to fire all weapons. I use numpad 3, but again you can use any key you like as long as it is unmodified. Now that that's done, open up your chat and type in the following. /bind_save_file and then a file path and a file name of your choosing. I use c:/sto_binds_space.txt, but as I said, whatever path and file name you like. Now once you hit enter, you can open up the Windows Explorer and go to that location, and you will see here the file is. You can open it in any text editor like, you know, the normal Windows editor or Notepad++ or whatever. Now your file probably won't look as organized as this one, but you can freely rearrange the items as you see fit. Now how this works is, first you see the key and then the action that will occur in Star Trek Online. So for example, if I press the tab key, the map will open. If I press the Q key, my throttle will adjust by -25, so that's a quarter, you know, power. Or if I press numpad 3, I will fire all weapons. Now, what is important to know is that in Star Trek Online you can set an indefinite amount of commands to a single key, and as long as every command in the chain invokes a cooldown, it will skip to the next command that is bound to that key when you press the key a second, a third, a fourth time, and so on. So basically you make a new entry with any key you like. I use the U key, but again it can be any key you like as long as it is unmodified. And then a really long chain of commands. Now my first command is power exec distribute shields. This command will evenly distribute the shield power on all facings. After that, it is just a long chain of tray powers that should be used in a certain order. Now, how the ordering works is, there's two numbers for each tray exec by tray. The first number is the row, and the second number is the column. So in game it would be like this. On the first tray, this would be 0, 0. This would be 0, 1. This would be 0, 2, 0, 3, and so on. This would be 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, and so on. 2, 0, 2, 1, 2, 2, and so on. Now, what you want is, come up with like a sensible order in which to fire all your skills automatically. In my case, after evenly distributing shield power, I first fire up the 0-2 power, which in my case is launch elite scorpion fighters. Then 1-0, which is tactical team. And after that, basically I fire up all those powers in a row. Emergency power to shields, transfer shield strength, and so on. Until finally, the last power in my chain is actually the 1-6 power, which would be auxiliary to battery. Now, the thing is, because the way the Star Trek Online queues up additional powers, after you have completed your chain, you have to put in the entire thing backwards. Like you can see, 1-6 is only once in the chain. Before that, it's 1-5. And after that, it's 1-5 again. 0-1, 0-1. So you want to do the entire thing backwards. Because if a power is on cooldown and you hit that button again, it won't fire up the actual next power in the command chain, but it will actually fire up the last power in the chain. So you need to do the entire thing backwards. In the description below, I will link to the Star Trek Online wiki page on keybinds, where you can find more detailed information on how it works and what commands you can actually use. So, well, that's basically it. Once you have added your key and the entire command chain that you want to use, you save the file and you go back to Star Trek Online chat and type bind load file cw sto binds space txt and hit enter, and that's it. Now this key was successfully added to your control scheme. Now you could test this out if you go into any mission and you just mash that key over and over again. You will see that it will activate all the powers you have added and it will just work. But raping a single key over and over is not fun. So we don't want to continuously press a single key over and over again, and therefore we will let another program do our bidding for us. And this will be Autohotkey. Alright, we're getting there slowly but surely. Now, in the last part, we have set up a large command chain for a single key, but we do not want to press this key over and over again, so we're gonna get a tool that will do that for us, and it's called Autohotkey. Of course, you can find the download link and links to the documentation of the program in the description below. And after you've installed it, you go to your documents folder, where you will find a file called autohotkey.ahk. Now this file is a default script that gets loaded automatically when you start Autohotkey. You just right click the file now and click on Edit Script, which will open Notepad with a script in it. Now, per default you will find something else here, but just delete everything that is in the default script and replace it with this instead. Now, the way it works is you first have the key that does something. Here we have the F1 key, followed by 2 colons, which is just a delimiter. So, if I press the F1 key, the following happens. An internal variable, in this case called myvar, is set to 1, and while myvar is set to 1, Autohotkey sends u and then 4 times f, then waits for 500 milliseconds and returns, unless myvar is set to 0, in which case the script breaks. Now, why u and 4 times f? As you can remember, the key I use for my command chain is u. So basically every 500 milliseconds Autohotkey presses u once. You could lower this time, but it's not really needed because the activation time for any power in Star Trek Online is half a second, so it is completely useless if you set this to less. And then I press 4 times F. Now F is my interact key. It's default, I haven't changed it, so this is the interact key. Now the reason I press it 4 times in a row is not only so that it picks up all the loot that drops automatically, but also so that it basically automatically clicks away all the pesky pop-ups, you know, with briefings and when your science officer lost his toothbrush or whatever. Like, it just clicks everything away and it auto-loots stuff for you. And it auto-loots stuff also because you have set the auto-loot option to enabled previously. Now, what it does not do is auto-need on shared loot. So if you get the, you know, the pop-up window with need and greet and pass, it does not automatically need on that. But since hotkeys for those actions were introduced in one of the last patches, you could add those. Like, if you go to the keybinds and set need to, like, I don't know, L, you could just add the L button in here too, and you would also automatically need on everything that drops. But you know, I don't actually want that. I don't want to need on all the shit that drops, and also I don't want to be an asshole to teammates that have not agreed to need on all, so I'm not gonna add this. And well, then we have the F2 button, which basically stops all this. It sets myvar to 0, and as previously stated, if myvar is 0, the entire previous script breaks. So once you have F2, all this stops. So instead of pressing the one single key, in my case U, all the time over and over again, I just have to press F1 once, and it will smash that button for me until I press F2. This part here you can ignore for now. I will come back to this a bit later. But yeah, that's basically it. You don't have to do anything more in Autohotkey, and this actually is kinda a good control scheme on its own. So if you don't actually want to use voice commands, or if you don't have a microphone or whatever, you can just use this and actually use the F1 or F2 keys, or you know, whatever other keys you set this to, and this will work too. It will fire most of the skills that you set in the Keybind file automatically, and then you will only have to worry about your long cooldown skills, like, you know, brace for impact and so on. So yeah, we are set up for the final stretch now, which is actually making all this work with voice commands. And well, let's get to it. Alright, before we are going to implement our actual voice commands, just a few general words about speech recognition. Now here you can see the standard interface for Windows speech recognition. Some of you might know it already. Here you can switch between 3 states: on, sleep and off. We are going to ignore sleep for the purpose of this video, and on and off are pretty self-explanatory. As soon as I switch it to on, the engine will start working and I can give the computer voice commands. Let me demonstrate. Start calculator. Close calculator. Now, as you might have guessed, doing that in-game is not possible. Like, the game window will just make this disappear. And even if you could put it always on top, you wouldn't want to do that. So that leaves us with 2 options. Either we are going with an open microphone approach, and you have the microphone and the engine listening all the time. But that would require you to use headphones and a generally pretty quiet environment. Like if you have traffic noise or yelling children in the background, this is not going to work, and it will produce a lot of undesired commands that you don't actually want to be executed. So the second approach is using push to talk. Now, once you have installed the Windows Speech Recognition macros program, such a push to talk functionality is thankfully implemented already. Namely, the control and window hotkeys. Now, the way it works is, if you press them shortly once, it will toggle the setting between off and on, like this. However, if you keep the 2 buttons pressed down, it will actually work as a push-to-talk button, and it will switch to listening as long as you hold the two buttons down, and it will return to off as soon as you release them, like this. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the entire purpose of this control scheme is that you can use only one hand to play the game. Now, if you decide that you want your mouse hand to steer the ship and play the game, Control and the Windows button are not going to work for us. So we need to remap this hotkey. Unfortunately, there is no native way in Windows page recognition macros to do that, but we can use Autohotkey to do this for us, and this is what this script is all about. Now, what happens here is if you press the middle mouse button, it sends left control and left Windows down, and then waits until you release the middle button, and then sends the left control and left Windows key back up, thereby exactly mimicking how the functionality of the key works. So, if I click the middle mouse button shortly, it will toggle again between the settings. And if I keep it pressed, it will work as a push-to-talk button. So, now, whatever control method you choose to use, open microphone or push-to-talk, both will work fairly well under the appropriate circumstances. Now, finally, let's get to the macros themselves. Alright, now let's get to the macros themselves. Once you have installed Windows Speech Recognition macros and started it, you will find a new symbol in your system's tray. In this case, a blue thingy with gears in it. Now you right-click it and click on Explore Speech Macros. This will open up an Explorer window for the Speech Macros folder, which is inside your Documents folder. Now the first time you go there, this folder will be completely empty. There's like no example macros or nothing. Of course, I will provide the macro for you in the description below. Now, as you can see, the file extension for the macros are WSR Mac, but actually those are all XML files, so you can just take the normal Windows text editor to edit them. Now, if you make changes to the script or make a new script altogether, what is important to know that is when you save the file, you have to change the encoding to Unicode. Per default, this is set to ANSI, and this program does not like ANSI. Like it will throw an error and it will just not work. So always save to Unicode. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to use the normal Windows editor to explain the things, but I'm gonna use Notepad++ instead, because it has syntax highlighting and it will be easier to follow. Now, basically what you see here is you see some XML file declaration and then some comment about the author, which obviously is me. And well, then the various commands that you can use. Now I have started by putting a comment for which command this actually is, followed by what needs to be done. Every single command is enclosed by command tags, and then the first thing is listen for. Now everything in this listen for tags is what you can actually say to the computer, which will then cause a certain action to occur. For example, if I say go to red alert, or if I say prepare for battle, or if I say all hands go to battle stations, the computer will send a single F1 keystroke. Now, as you can remember back in the Autohotkey script file, F1 is the key that starts our battle loop, that will press the U and the F keys over again for autoloot and to activate all the skills that we want to actually use. Now, the next command we have is stand down weapons or go to green alert, which will cause a single F2 key press, which of course, as you know, will break the battle loop. Now, as you can remember at the very start of the video, we set up single hotkeys in Star Trek Online for certain powers that we want to be able to call specifically, like evasive maneuvers. Now, if I say evasive maneuvers, or if I say get us out of here, what happens is it will send 5 times E, which will increase the throttle to a maximum, and then it will press the num8 key. Now, the num8 key in Star Trek Online I have bound to evasive maneuvers, but of course you have to change this if you set your evasive maneuvers to another hotkey. And the reason why I do this double is because usually, or at least sometimes, when you use evasive maneuvers, you are mid-battle. So that means that also the Autohotkey script will still be spamming you every half second. And you can only activate one power in Star Trek Online at a time. So sometimes, when you say evasive maneuvers, the num8 command, it cannot register because another power is activating already. So it waits half a second and then tries again. Now this is still not 100% reliable because it's still possible that the command won't be registered because another one fires, but I found that it works, let's say, 95% of the time. If it really should not work the first time around, just repeat the command. Now, the next thing here is evasive plus battery. If I say emergency power to engines or max speed, it will not only fire up evasive maneuvers, but also use an engine battery, which I have bound to my num9 key. So if I say max speed, both those kills will activate. Now if I say full impulse, that's exactly what it does. It goes to full impulse, which I have bound to the num7 key. Same thing goes for drop impulse. Now of course the key for toggle impulse is the same. So if I'm not already at full impulse, but I say disengage full impulse, it will still go to full impulse. But I trust that you can use logic to use the appropriate command in the appropriate situation. Speaking about that, now I've tried to gun with sort of a, role-playing, in-universe approach for my commands, but literally you can use any command you like. For example, if you would like to say, something like, lol, let's rape some silence to go to battle mode, then you can totally do that. It will work. Well, here's a few commands that are interesting. The faster and the slower commands. Now what they do is press E and Q a single time to increase or decrease the throttle. But as I have mentioned earlier, you probably won't do that. Like, you change the throttle quite a lot and you will not want to sit here and be like, faster, faster, slower, 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 faster, because that would be tedious and stupid. So you might as well, just delete those commands altogether. Besides, if you have followed the video, you will have bound the throttle command to either the mouse wheel and of course the Q and E keys, so we won't actually need those. Now here we have stop the engines, and then we have the fire command. This sends the hotkey for fire all weapons, because even if you activate all your skills and stuff and have autofire set to cancel with non-combat, it will still not automatically fire unless you, press the fire all weapons button once, which this does. Like, you can say fire everything at will. And yeah, actually, all those words that have a question mark in front of them, those are optional. Like, you don't need to say those. It will be enough if you just say fire. Or you can say fire, fire everything, or you can just say fire at will. Likewise, you can say just red alert or go to red alert, or you could say something weird like all to battle stations, like that would work too. Now the words without the question marks are actually needed though, so you cannot skip those. Well, and then basically here's a list of commands that activate, the single skills, the oh shit buttons and the long as cooldown buttons, like reverse shield polarity. If I say reverse shield polarity, what happens here is I want this skill to fire as soon as I call it. Like, I do not want to, chance it that it may not activate because another power is activating. So what happens first is that it sends the F2 button to stop the U spam loop, and then it waits a bit, and then it fires the hotkey num4 for reverse shield polarity in game, waits again a bit for the power to activate, and then resumes the U key spam. Now the reason I have not done this for evasive maneuvers is that I found that most of the time when I used evasive maneuvers it was actually out of combat, like in infected space, between the two generator sites, or in Kitome Accord space between the two sites. I am not in combat then, but I want to use evasive maneuvers. So if I would do this command like this, then after I've used evasive maneuvers, the use spam would continue, which at that moment I don't want to, because I'm still on my way to the enemies. I hope this is not too confusing for you. Then, well, just more skills like fire at my mark, which, well, fires the fire at my mark skill. Brace for impact, which not only fires brace for impact, which I have bound to num5, but also my subspace field modulator device. So if I say brace for impact, those two skills will activate. And finally, my fleet maneuver gamma command, which I could also call like, you know, give me overpowered DPS right now command, which will activate the following three skills: Tactical Fleet 2, Fleet Maneuver Gamma, and Go Down Fighting. Now, I have also listed it for Fleet Maneuver Omega because I switch Omega and Gamma all the time, and every time I made that mistake and nothing happened, I felt like an idiot. So I just added this to, you know, fire those powers as well if I say it wrong. And, well, last but not least, I have a post DPS command. Now, I'm not gonna explain this in great detail. What it does, it sends a single F4 keystroke, and what that does is fire up yet another hidden Autohotkey script, which will basically switch to the advanced combat tracker window if you actually use that program, copy the latest encounter results to the clipboard, and then post the DPS of the last encounter in Star Trek Online to team chat. But I'm not gonna explain this in great detail because it would take too long. Well, yeah, and that's it. And as you can see, if you want to add a new command, it's very simple. Just make a new command tag, add some listen for tags, and then add in what you actually want it to do, which, you know, usually will involve send keys. And, well, that's really it. If you still have questions or found it hard to follow this part, just feel free to comment in the comments below, and I will try my best to answer all your questions about this. Now, finally, of course, I will show off how this all works in practice. And I'm gonna queue up for some elite STF, and I'm gonna show you how, you know, the gameplay actually looks like with this command scheme. And I'm gonna use open microphone, so I'm usually not using push to talk, so that means while I'm doing that I won't be explaining anything, or I will not make any comments. The only thing I will say are commands that will then be executed in the game. And one last thing, some of you, if you were able to follow so far, might think, at the end of the day I do not really have that much to do, you know. The gist of the control scheme is that I have to steer the ship either with using the mouse or the WASD keys, keep some target locked, and, you know, just yell a command like every 20 seconds or so. And that's correct. I mean, I literally don't have to do anything else. I don't have to really care about my power rotation, I don't have to care about looting, nothing. Everything gets mostly done automatically. And some of you may think, well, where's the fun in that? Like, there's not much game left to play. And of course, for some it will be this way. I'm totally aware that many, or at least some of you, will not like the gameplay style of this, but I hope that I will be able to show off why it is cool and awesome to use this control scheme in the demonstration that will follow right now. Full impulse. Drop impulse. Prepare for battle. Fire. Fleet maneuver Gamma. Reverse shield polarity. Brace for impact. Full speed. Maximum speed. Emergency power to engines. Play artist Leonard Nimoy.
Playing artist Leonard Nimoy.
Reverse shield polarity. Stop playing. Evasive maneuvers. Brace for impact. Reverse shield polarity. Max speed. Play artist Dragon Force.
Playing artist Dragon Force.
Stand down weapons. Prepare for battle. Fleet Maneuver Gamma. Tag my target. Stand down weapons. Stop playing. Alright, and that's that. Now, as you might have noticed, in between I made a little slip up and I accidentally called for a command that isn't really existing, like I think it was maximum speed, where the correct command would have been max speed, but once I used an appropriate command, in that case emergency power to engines, it worked. So yeah, it is generally a good idea to have several variations of a single command. So if you have like a brain lag and the exact command doesn't immediately come to mind, you can still think of an alternative to it. Now, one more thing is, you might ask yourself, how good was the performance in that? And well, what can I say? Even though I fiddled around with the camera and, was concentrating on not to mess up the speech commands and, was drinking beer and smoking shisha, I still got first in DPS. So, yeah, as you clearly can see, this control scheme is really, really good. So, if you decide to replicate it, have fun with it. Alright, now just one more little addendum, like sort of an epilogue to answer some questions that some of you still might have. For example, the ones of you that have used Autohotkey or Windows speech recognition makers before, you might wonder, why did I set the keybinds in Star Trek Online to use single unmodified keys? Because both Autohotkey and Windows speech recognition makers are fully capable of sending modified keys, like Control 5, Shift L, whatever. But the problem is, Star Trek Online does not register those modifiers. Like, if you tell Autohotkey to send Control 5, Star Trek Online will still only register the 5. And I don't know why it is this way. It must be some sort of weird bug with the engine or whatever. But that is the reason we use single unmodified keys for the keybinds. Now, also you might wonder, what if you're not using an English Windows version? Like, say, you use German Windows or French Windows. Now, there's two possible solutions to that. For one, you could use the free tool called Vistalizator, which of course is linked in the description below, to change your language to English. This will immediately work and you will have no further problems, but some of you will not exactly dig that. You will be like, nah, I don't want to change my Windows version for that. But what you also can do is you can still follow the video up to the point where you do the listen for triggers in the speech macro, and you just add some triggers in your appropriate language. Like, for example, if you're having German Windows, you could add a trigger, like instead for go to red alert or prepare for battle, you could say something like Alarmstufe Rot. Or, if you're really a little bit batshit insane, you could go with something like Wir werden Torpedos feuern, bis der Himmel schwarz ist und die Vögel zu Fuß marschieren. Well, if you're crazy. Or, if you're having French Windows, you could add triggers like J'abandonne or Je me retire. Totally legit, and with those triggers it will work as well as it would if you use English Windows. And yeah, well, for the last question, what the fuck was that Bilbo Baggins song? Well, I like to imagine it this way. Remember back in the 60s when your parents, your grandparents and literally everyone on the planet were taking copious amounts of acid and LSD? Now take all those measures of drugs combined, like a really large amount of medicine, and Leonard Nimoy took that and then he made that song. Yeah, and while I have no idea why any one of you would ever want to expose himself to that song ever again, I will still link it for you in the description below. So that's it, I guess. Have fun with this control scheme and see you guys in the next video. Well, just kidding. Of course there's more. Now, one final problem that may arise is that if you put the macros that I will link, of course, in the description below and put them in your speech macros folder, and you set everything up exactly as I described in the video, and they just don't work. There's two possible reasons for that. Now, the first one, of course, is that your microphone is not plugged in or, set to mute or whatever. But more likely, the problem is that the speech macros are not signed. Now, what you have to do is you go to your speech macros folder by, again, explore speech macros, and you just right-click all the ones you will use, like the Star Trek macro, and you just click sign speech macros. Then you press yes a few times, and OK, and that was it. Now, after that, they should work. I'm fairly confident I'm done now.